Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I had a card come in just this past week, which was the card I alluded to in my last video, which was going to be the 90th card from the Diamond Star set. It's actually card number 89 in the set, and we'll look at it more closely up, but this came in. It's Joe Strip, who played for the Brooklyn Dodgers during this time when this card was produced in 1936. It's in a CGC holder, which is the first CGC holder actually I've ever gotten, and it's the first CGC holder for the set. The reason I did that is I found one that was reasonably priced, and the card itself looked really presentable, as opposed to some of the other options I had available. There was like a PSA 5 that was going to be about $50 more. So I ended up just making an offer. First they sent me an offer and I sent a counter offer, and we kind of settled between the two offers, and I'm pretty happy with it. And it'll fit nicely into the case. It's not like large and bulky like the Beckett holders tend to be. So I've kind of avoided purchasing Beckett cards just because of the case itself. It has nothing to do with like Beckett per se, but I think this will kind of go well with the SUC and the PSA holders, because it's not just all one. When I started the set, I wanted to kind of do mostly PSA, but then I submitted some cards for grading at a national in 2023 and with SGC because they were offering a special at that time for the national, and that's how I kind of started grading with SGC thereafter. So that kind of like stopped me getting all PSA cards for the set, and I started getting more cards for it. So I wanted to just kind of talk a little bit about what this experience has kind of been like picking these cards up. We'll do a little more in-depth wrap-up video, obviously, in the future as this finishes the set. I have 6 more to be able to kind of acquire. I think realistically, given the value of the cards I still have to be able to pick up, we're looking at probably like a 2026 early spring, probably finish. It may even stretch out to the national because I might want to like a selection of cards for like one of the final ones that I'll need to be able to pick up at that time. So it's not going to be done in the next month or two, but I do have a big card show coming up. Now we're in October. It'll actually be in November here in Chicago. So I'm hoping to maybe get 2 of the bigger ones that I still need at the show. Maybe the 2 biggest I still need, maybe. It really just depends on how many funds I can raise, because I still have some cards being sold at Greg Moore's Cards, which has actually been a really good experience for me. I had never done it before, and I was encouraged to do so by Brian Roths of B. Roth, who's obviously on YouTube as well, and a friend of collectors here. And it's worked out really well. It was all the cards I picked up in early May, even though like the discussion started in April. Mostly football cards from like the 70s and 80s were in those orders, and they've done exceptionally well. I've been really surprised at like how much some cards go for, and I know I never would have been able to get that price on my own, especially the ungraded cards in particular, the ones that were already graded. Those kind of went pretty much what you'd expect them for, just maybe at or a little bit above or below comps, depending on like how many bidders are out it and how many copies were kind of up for sale at the same time. But the ungraded stuff has really been kind of the huge wild card, and it's generated more than I thought. And they still have like 50 more of my cards that they're planning to list, and they have like 11 or 12 up right now. And they've been averaging about, I think on the ungraded ones, about $16 a card. This is before they take their cut, which is going to be a quarter of that, so 25% of it. So I don't see as much money as I did with the graded stuff, but I'm hoping that will build up enough funds where I can take a little bit more to the show in November between now and then, and maybe go after the Jimmy Fox and the Millot at the same time, which are the 2 biggest cards I still need, followed by the Lefty Grove, are probably the 3 big ones. The other remaining 3 are in a completely different price range. But like what I wanted to really kind of touch base on is, this has really been interesting because, watching YouTube and seeing other collectors, you always find like new things that are kind of really catching your eye. And I have this huge list of things that I want to be able to start working on in the future, knowing that someday this will be done, and someday I'll return to the 53 Bowman set thereafter and get that done too. So it's somewhere near on the horizon that I'll be starting to work on like new projects. And what I've been kind of really striving to do with that list is really narrow down like what are the sets that I really like, and what's kind of maybe reasonable for my price range, probably from now and the next 10 years. So it'll be interesting to share that as we get closer to do it, as I kind of like finalize the list too, because I think right now it's kind of a brainstorm list. So I'll probably will like narrow it down a little bit. And I do plan on really kind of starting with like the Hall of Fame players first, as opposed to like buying these lots and started building up sets that way, like I've kind of done historically. Just because some of the sets, well, first you have a hard time finding lots because they're always sold separately because there's so much value at each and every card. That I wanted to kind of start with the big names and kind of get them out of the way. And if I don't finish them or I get partially done, at least I have like a lot of the Hall of Famers in there. And I'm hoping it's kind of filling some kind of gaps in like decades of collecting that I've had. And I will say my sweet spot, the stuff that I really, really, really enjoy kind of collecting in the vintage era is 30s, 40s, and 50s. So it's probably going to really skew heavily to those sets in that era. Before then, I don't know enough about 20s and teens, to be quite honest. I know the big sets, there's definitely going to be some stuff that are on there, but it's just not something I've done a lot of research on, whereas like I have like looked up a lot of stuff from those other 3 decades. They're a little bit easier too, to kind of, there wasn't as much variety as there were in like the 20s, teens, and before. So it's a little more streamlined what you're looking for. And the Hall of Famers are more familiar to me than some of the ones even earlier in the century, just because those are the ones that I grew up reading books on. Many of them are still alive. Players that my dad talked about, that he heard his father talk about, so my grandfather talk about. So there's just like sort of a more of a connection that draws me into those decades than anything else. And then of course it's going to be like the players that I grew up watching. So there's going to probably be something that's going to be like 90s in there that's going to be maybe a little bit more scarce and harder to be able to get. But also not like break the bank at the same time. So that'll be kind of fun doing that. But I will say kind of, it's been fun like seeing other things from other YouTubers. But, like for these cards, it's tempting, right? To kind of jump in and like get other things. So it's kind of that FOMO experience that I've been kind of like working against in many ways, especially as I've gotten closer, because I'm like, oh, I'll be done soon. So I'm starting to like have my eye gaze on other things. But these cards within themselves are, it's not cheap to be able to pick up cards from the 1930s, especially ones that are in good shape that are already graded too. So, it does pretty much take up my hobby funds each and every month, just kind of acquiring 1 or 2 of these, sometimes more than that, depending on what the card is. So it's kind of really challenged me as a collector to kind of be comfortable with just getting a card or 2 a month. Whereas before, I would get a lot of different things that I really liked. As I was building sets, I would just buy and kind of get them because they're all things that could kind of fit in within my monthly budget, except for the very biggest cards. But like these are not inexpensive, especially as I'm getting down to my list, the ones that were produced just in like 1936 in particular. They only were produced 1 year. So that's kind of already a little bit more scarcity, whereas this interesting commercial on behind me, I'm not sure what this is. Looks like a belly button talking or a neck. That was weird, but it distracted me, but I'll get back to this. So especially like in 36, there was cards produced for the Diamond Stars, like some of the ones that were issued first in 34 were released again, as I mentioned this before, 34, 35, 36. So you have like a lot of copies you can draw from to be able to work on this set if you're not so tied to the date that they actually were issued. Same thing with 35. Sometimes more often you have like 2 years worth of it. And I think the print one was higher in 35 than it was even in 34. So it's not too hard finding cards from 35. But these 36s have been a little bit more challenging. There's just not as readily available. And you notice that just even when you monitor the listings, like on eBay, you'll see cards pop up from 36 from time to time, but they're not in the same, there's not as many that come up for like 35, 34 in like the same searches that I'm kind of doing. So, that's all I want to kind of like touch base on is like, it's kind of, this set has really kind of made me more of a focused collector. And I think I kind of already was, but like this kind of further reinforced it. And I will say that I've kind of enjoyed it because it even though the temptation's there, the motivation to be able to finish this and complete the project that I made a commitment to myself to do is overweighs like sort of that FOMO of like chasing after like gold refractors, Topps blacks, and rookie golds, and cool vintage cards. So, you know, like, I think a lot of set collectors probably can talk to that experience too. It's probably not a unique experience that I'm feeling, but I just wanted to kind of like share kind of my experience with it. And those cards are exciting. You know, if I were to pick those up, I know I'd be as equally as excited. But you know, a Joe Strip card, which is not a player I ever would have chased after for any other reason previously, other than complete this set, brings me a lot of satisfaction, knowing that it's been a bit of a hunt to be able to kind of get this one, whereas some of the other ones are a little bit easier to acquire. And you know, I get a lot of satisfaction once it's finally in my hands and I can look at it, and it's going to be going in my case shortly. But that's what I wanted to kind of share. I know I have like the Cubs Brewers game on here in the background. I just got done watching Chelsea and Liverpool, which I was very excited how that game ended. It looks like the Cubs are getting beat up a little bit by the Brewers. So I think anybody that's watched this channel knows that I'm not going to have a problem with that. But I'll kind of withhold any other comments because I know there's Cub fans probably watching too that are not too happy. And you know, I wish you luck with your team. You know, it's kind of a weird thing. You're at a team here in Chicago that I don't follow. The other teams I do kind of keep an eye on, obviously, and the White Sox being the biggest one. But the Cubs, like I've never bought the Marquee Network. The only times I see them is usually when they're on national TV. And I usually am not pulling for them whenever I'm watching them, or I'm completely indifferent to what they do that given day. So it's kind of a weird experience. Like Chicago's like super excited about them right now, and okay, I don't care. It's weird because like any other team that would be in the playoffs, I would definitely be like pretty excited here in Chicago. I'm actually more interested in like the Chicago Fire finally making the playoffs after like a huge drought in MLS, which I know is like kind of silly in comparison to Major League Baseball. But like, again, it doesn't interest me too much what the Cubs are doing. It's just interesting. So I'm not going to be a hater either. I'm not going to like be rooting against them and things like that. I think my years of doing that are over. I will admit that I was probably a pretty bitter Sox fan, like probably like even as recently as 10 years ago. Now it's like, okay, if your team wins, that's fine. You know, like I hope you enjoy it because it's winning is not easy here in Chicago. So you know, I can empathize with any fan here in Chicago when their team is losing, and not always sharing success, but I can understand what that's like when your team is doing really well. So, you know, again, good luck to the Chicago Cubs fans and the team out there. I'll keep an eye on it, but that's about the extent of it. So let's look at this card more closely. So I'm going to turn the camera around and we can kind of look at it more closely here as I wrap up. All right, I turned the camera around, and so here's the Joe Strip card, a little bit more close. So like the CGC case, as I mentioned, is high quality. I know other people have talked about that before, so I'm not really reviewing them. But what I thought was kind of interesting, on the back of it, they have like a QR code like PSA does that links to their pop report. And this was the only copy that's ever been graded by CGC. So people just start submitting, you know, like vintage cards in this era into CGC in general. I'm sure the pop report for SGC and PSA is very different for this card. It's harder to get, but I wouldn't say it's super rare. Like we're not talking like 20 copies or less. It's none of the cards in this set are like that. I would say the ones that are considered the high series, they're a little more scarce than these for whatever reason, but not by much. All the cards printed in 36 are a little bit harder to find in comparison to the other years. But look at this image, it's pretty cool. Completed swing here, which I think is pretty neat. It has all the colors that you normally would have seen in this set really featured in here, from the green infield, the yellow infield, and then you have like this red outfield with like a sort of dark blue, almost purple kind of wall that leads itself into the grandstands themselves, and the bright blue sky. They have the contrast there, and the beautiful Dodgers logo is featured very clearly on his uniform here. One of the things I did notice on here, it's got a little mark on here. I don't know what that might be or how this card was stored historically, but those little kind of features, yes, kind of will take away from it receiving a higher score, but I think given that it was a card printed almost 100 years ago, 90 years next year, it kind of brings some character for me, you know, kind of like, okay, this card, or they're not meant to be perfect, I think. You know, when you find ones that are like almost out of the pack, it's like amazing to see those, but that's not typically what you would expect to find. So like seeing a little bit of character on that card is something I kind of admire. Now, whereas if I could pay the same price for one that was flawless, centered, almost pack fresh, you know, 7, 8, or 9 score, that'd be great. But obviously I'm not looking at that price range for the set. On the backs of the 36, they're all gonna be the blue ink backs. There's no green ink backs for 36. This one kind of denotes that he was traded at some point for a lot of other players that actually are also featured in this set here too, which is pretty interesting, and talks about him being a good hitter as a third baseman. He batted 306 in the previous year. When I looked over his career stats, he just wore something like in the mid-20s or so. Not too bad. Right around a 300 hitters for his career, and kind of was a decent fielder for the most part. So he was a very serviceable player during his time period. And when he played for the Dodgers, this was more towards the end of his career. He spent most of his time in Major League Baseball during the 1920s. So this was kind of beginning to be the end for Joe Strip. But here he is, that's the Joe Strip card. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, a little longer than I normally talk, but I hope you enjoyed it and have a great rest of your weekend. Just to note, I'll be doing videos this month, but they're gonna be a little bit probably more spread out. Probably won't have as many just for this month and probably this month alone. So I'll have another video that I probably will target to release next weekend. And then I'll try and make sure I have content for the remainder of the month, kind of redoing or continuing some of the series I have and anything else that may come to mind. All right, enjoy the rest of your weekend.